Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and on today's episode, we're bringing you part 2 in our 5-part adaptation of The Missing Three-Quarter, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The great detective Sherlock Holmes has been hired by Mr. Cyril Overton of Trinity College, Cambridge, to find Godfrey Staunton, a star rugby player in the three-quarter position and sole heir of the wealthy nobleman Lord Mount James, who has disappeared from his hotel room on the eve of a vital game with rival Oxford. Holmes may not be a great follower of sport, but he has found the circumstances of Staunton's disappearance interesting enough to merit an investigation. As we rejoin the story in part 2, Sherlock Holmes brings his investigation to the hotel from which Staunton disappeared. Sherlock Holmes was a past master in the art of putting a humble witness at his ease, and, very soon, in the privacy of Godfrey Staunton's abandoned room, he had extracted all that the porter had to tell. The visitor of the night before was not a gentleman, neither was he a working man. He was simply what the porter described as a medium-looking chap, a man of 50, beard grizzled, pale face, quietly dressed. He seemed himself to be agitated. The porter had observed his hand trembling when he had held out the note. Godfrey Staunton had crammed the note into his pocket. Staunton had not shaken hands with the man in the hall. They had exchanged a few sentences, of which the porter had only distinguished the one word, time. Then they had hurried off in the manner described. It was just 10:30 by the hall clock.
Let me see. You are the day porter, are you not?
Yes, sir. I go off duty at 11.
Night porter saw nothing, I suppose?
No, sir. One theater party came in late, no one else.
Were you on duty all day yesterday?
Yes, sir.
Did you take any messages to Mr. Staunton?
Yes, sir. One telegram.
Ah, that is interesting. What o'clock was this?
About 6.
Where was Mr. Staunton when he received it?
Here in his room.
Were you present when he opened it?
Yes, sir. I waited to see if there was an answer.
Where was there?
Yes, sir. He wrote an answer.
Did you take it?
No, he took it himself.
But he wrote it in your presence.
Yes, sir. I was standing by the door, and he, with his back turned at the table. When he had written it, he said, "All right, porter, I will take this myself."
What did he write it with?
A pen, sir.
Was the telegraphic form one of these on the table?
Yes, sir. It was the top one.
Holmes rose. Taking the forms, he carried them over to the window and carefully examined that which was uppermost before throwing them down again with a shrug of disappointment.
Ah, it is a pity he did not write in pencil. As you have no doubt frequently observed, Watson, the impression usually goes through, a fact which has dissolved many a happy marriage. However, I can find no trace here. I rejoice, however, to perceive that he wrote with a broad-pointed quill pen, and I can hardly doubt that we'll find some impression upon this blotting pad. Ah, yes, surely this is the thing.
He tore off a strip of the blotting paper and turned towards us. Cyril Overton was much excited.
Hold it to the glass.
That is unnecessary. The paper is thin, and the reverse will give me the message. Here it is.
He turned it over, and we read the message. "Stand by us, for God's sake."
So that is the tail end of the telegram which Godfrey Staunton dispatched within a few hours of his disappearance. There are at least 6 words of the message which have escaped us, but what remains, "Stand by us for God's sake," proves that this young man saw formidable danger which approached him, and from which someone else could protect him. Us. Mark you, another person was involved. Who should it be but the pale-faced, bearded man, who seemed himself in so nervous a state? What then is the connection between Godfrey Staunton and the bearded man? And what is the third source from which each of them sought for help against pressing danger? Our inquiry has already narrowed down to that.
We have only to find to whom that telegram is addressed.
Exactly, my dear Watson. Your reflection, though profound, had already crossed my mind, but I dare say it may have come to your notice that concerning the content of another man's message, there may be some disinclination on the part of the officials to oblige you. There's so much red tape in these matters. However, I have no doubt that with a little delicacy and finesse, the end may be attained. Meanwhile, I should like, in your presence, Mr. Overton, to go through these papers which have been left upon the table.
There were a number of letters, bills, and notebooks, which Holmes turned over and examined with quick, nervous fingers and darting, penetrating eyes.
Nothing here. By the way, I suppose your friend was a healthy young fellow. Nothing amiss with him.
Sound as a bell.
Have you ever known him ill?
Not a day.
Perhaps he was not so strong as you suppose. I should think that he may have had some secret trouble. With your assent, I will put one or two of these papers in my pocket in case they should bear upon our future inquiry.
One moment.
We looked up at this querulous voice to find a queer little old man, jerking and twitching in the doorway. He was dressed in rusty black, with a very broad-brimmed top hat and a loose white necktie, the whole effect being that of a very rustic parson or of an undertaker's mute. Yet in spite of his shabby and even absurd appearance, his voice had a sharp crackle, and his manner a quick intensity which commanded attention.
Who are you, sir, and by what right do you touch this gentleman's papers? I am a private detective, and I am endeavoring to explain his disappearance. Oh, you are you? And who instructed you, eh? This gentleman, Mr. Staunton's friend, was referred to me by Scotland Yard. Who are you, sir?
I am Cyril Overton.
Then it is you who sent me a telegram. My name is Lord Mount James. I came as quickly as the Bayswater bus would bring me. So you've instructed a detective?
Yes, sir.
And are you prepared to meet the cost?
I've no doubt, sir, that my friend Godfrey, when we find him, will be prepared to do that.
But if he is never found, eh? Answer me that.
In that case, no doubt his family...
Nothing of the sort, sir. Don't look at me for a penny. Not a penny. You understand that, Mr. Detective? I am all the family that this young man has got, and I tell you that I am not responsible. If he has any expectations, it is due to the fact that I have never wasted money, and I do not propose to begin to do so now. As to those papers with which you are now making so free, I may tell you that in case there should be anything of value among them, you will be held strictly to account for what you do with them. Very good, sir. May I ask, in the meanwhile, whether you have yourself any theory to account for this young man's disappearance? No, sir, I have not. He is big enough and old enough to look after himself, and he is so foolish as to lose himself, I entirely refuse to accept the responsibility of hunting for him.
A mischievous twinkle emerged in my friend's eye.
I quite understand your position, but perhaps you don't quite understand mine. Godfrey Staunton appears to have been a poor man. If he has been kidnapped, it could not have been for anything which he himself possesses. The fame of your wealth has gone abroad, Lord Mount James, and it is entirely possible that a gang of thieves have secured your nephew in order to gain from him some information as to your house, your habits, and your treasure.
The face of our unpleasant little visitor turned as white as his neckcloth.
Heavens, sir, what an idea! I never thought of such villainy. What inhuman rogues there are in the world. But Godfrey is a fine lad, a staunch lad. Nothing would induce him to give his old uncle away. I'll have the plate moved over to the bank this evening. In the meantime, spare no pains, Mr. Detective. I beg you to leave no stone unturned to bring him safely back. As to money, well, so far as a 5 or even a 10 goes, you can always look to me.
Even in his chastened frame of mind, the noble miser could give us no information which could help us, for he knew little of the private life of his nephew. Our only clue lay in the truncated telegram, and with a copy of this in his hand, Holmes set forth to find a second link for his chain. We had shaken off Lord Mount James, and Overton had gone to consult with the other members of his team over the misfortune which had befallen them. As we come to the end of part 2 in our program, Holmes and Watson prepare to carry their investigation of Godfrey Staunton's disappearance to the telegraph office from which the troubled rugby star had sent an urgent message the night before. A message ending with, "Stand by us for God's sake." Could the circumstances behind the youth's disappearance be in any way connected with his position as the heir to the bad-spirited but exceptionally wealthy Lord Mount James, as Holmes has hinted? Or might the young athlete's sudden disappearance be concerned with an entirely different set of affairs? Find out tomorrow evening as the investigation continues here with Part 3 of The Missing Three-Quarter on BeFM Drama.